Maritime Matters is brought to you live by Bahamas Maritime Connection.
What is maritime?
Maritime, simply put, relates to navigation or commerce on the high seas.
Some say money makes the world go round. I say ships move the money that make the world move.
Who navigates those large international ships?
How often are international ships required to be surveyed and inspected?
Maritime also protects our seas and borders by way of our local Bahamas Defense
It
Force.
is very sad to say that out of 1,500 plus ships that are registered under the Bahamian flag, only a very small amount of Bahamians are employed.
Maritime Matters.
Welcome one, welcome all. Welcome to Maritime Matters. I am your host, Captain Glenn Bain. This is Tuesday, the 11th of June, 2024. We're coming in live, and if it's Tuesday, it's Maritime Matters. Our topic tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is going to focus on the topic we had last week, carbon credits. What are we going to be saying tonight is we're going to delve deep into our carbon credit situation that the Bahamas, as you know, stands tall amongst most nations as far as sequestering carbon out of the environment and storing them in our seabed meadows in great volumes. During July of 2002, the OPM, being the Office of the Prime Minister, staged a town hall conference. They called it a town hall special conference on climate change and carbon market initiative. Presentations were made by Ms. Rochelle Newbold, who is dubbed our country's climate change czar, and also by Mr. Charles Hamilton. And he is one of our climate change advisors, or the climate change advisor at the Office of the Prime Minister. The Act was introduced during this conference, and that is the Act of Climate Change and Carbon Market Initiative. That was introduced during this conference, and Mr. Hamilton explained in detail the rules of engagement surrounding the implementation of the Act and how we are going to move forward in this country with carbon credit initiative. And this is back in 2002, July. As a result of this, I ventured into conducting further research on our country's carbon sinks and, of course, affiliated carbon credit returns we should be realizing as a country. Well, dear listener, I am so sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but what I previously anticipated as great wealth to be devised by our country as a result of owning that large volume of seagrass meadows, some 25% worldwide, seems now to be a rather unrealistic acclamation. Not that we don't possess the $156 billion worth of seagrass meadows sequestering carbon out of the environment, as was recently estimated by the University of Michigan sometime last year, 2003. But it's just that no entity needs to purchase that $156 billion worth of carbon being sequestered on an ongoing basis, even as I speak. Yes, our country is responsible for taking out of the environment tons and tons of carbon, while many entities in the world are introducing tons and tons of carbon into the environment. What does this all mean? This means, in a nutshell, that those responsible for the emitting of that carbon will be held accountable in due time. And there's a drawdown by the United Nations that by 2030, and I'm not so sure about the percentage, but I think it's about 70% or 30% of the carbon being emitted by any entity right now should be reduced to 70%. So that means that they are to take action. The world is to take action on reduction of carbon being emitted by whichever entity. Now we have large entities worldwide that supply electricity, and most of those entities depend on fossil fuel. And we know here in our country we have that provides power, well over 90% of the power to this country. And we also know that BPL depends highly on fossil fuel to provide that electrical energy that is needed throughout our country. So what I would have realized 2 years ago, etc., is that we should be paid, our country should be paid by the rest of the world, and the rest of the world meaning the United Nations, for absorbing as a carbon sink that 25% of carbon that is being absorbed out of the environment. Because what carbon is doing to the world right now as we speak is it's just bulking up and forming a blockage around the entire earth, because the carbon absorbs heat, and the heat makes it heavy so that it don't go into space. So instead of just continuing to go into space, the carbon is blocking the heat from leaving the Earth's environment and escaping into space. So what that is doing is every time the sun comes up and the sun heats up the Earth, as you know, the Earth becomes very hot, and the heat from the Earth, when the sun goes down, and even while the sun is still perpetrating, comes up, it rises and tries to escape, because heat rises and continue to rise until it gets into space, and then cool off and there's no more heat. But before it can get out of the Earth's environment, it is trapped and blocked by this carbon. And as said in many previous shows, this carbon comes from man-made machinery, because in the late, say, 2 centuries, since 70 and around, when cars started to be made, airplanes started to be made in the 1700s and 1800s, there was a balance on our Earth. There was a balance to the extent where animals, including humans, took in oxygen and exhaled carbon dioxide. All animals, even the fish, in the seas, in the oceans. And all plants, there are two kingdoms, the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom. All plants take in or consume carbon dioxide, process that, and exhale or release oxygen. So you have this cycle of life where the animals use what the plants give off, and the plants use what the animals give off. But the plants are kind of greedy, eh? And because they want to live and always live, the plants actually store some of that carbon dioxide or carbon, which is a big part of the carbon dioxide. And they store it in the roots of the plants. And not only the plants on land do this, the plants in the sea also does this. Now, you know, plants need sunlight to survive. So in the bottom of the ocean, where it's very deep, you wouldn't find hardly any plants. But on the banks, where plants are found in big numbers, especially in our country, the Bahamas. You see, the Bahamas happen to have more of the banks of the world. We have like 25%, because you may not notice, but when you talk about the Great Bahama Bank and the Little Bahama Bank, those are huge banks compared to other countries in the world. Most countries don't have banks. They have just oceans. So on our banks are what we know as seagrass. And what I can say to you also based on research is those seagrass form what you call seagrass meadows. And seagrass meadows are responsible for taking in carbon out of the environment through the water, through the sea. They take the carbon in and they store it right on that seabed, right underneath those seagrass meadows. And they are capable of storing tons and tons of carbon. Because, like I said, they're kind of greedy. As a matter of fact, the seagrass meadows, along with mangroves, and we know what mangroves are, eh? That's those things on the edge of the land that basically trees coming out of the water. The seagrass meadows is totally underwater. But the mangroves come out of the water, but the roots are still in the water. Those are responsible for sequestering at a very high rate. And when I say very high rate, it's 35 times more than those big trees you see in the forest in the Amazon and those big huge trees. They also take in carbon dioxide and carbon out of there and store it in those roots. But the seagrass meadows and the mangroves do it 35 times faster. So when the University of Michigan would have said that the Bahamas have enough sea carbon being sequestered out of the environment on an ongoing basis, that it is worth 156 billion dollars per year if they were to be paid for it. Now see, they didn't say they're going to get this money no matter what. What they're saying is, if we were to be paid for the amount of carbon we're sequestering out of the environment that is helping to save the world from carbon remaining in the environment, then we would get $156 billion a year just by having those seagrass meadows or owning those seagrass meadows and mangroves. And that is a significant and staggering figure, particularly for a country the size of the Bahamas, eh? Where we have less than 500,000 people. How are we going to share $156 billion a year? But that's what I thought we would have gotten. But the trick here, ladies and gentlemen, is the United Nations has put some money aside to pay for carbon credits that are actually lowering current emissions. So what they're saying in a nutshell is you can get credits if you have a reduction in carbon being emitted into the environment. Now, our BEC, or our BPL as we know it, emits, well, not big volume compared to big cities in the world, but it emits a substantial amount. And we would have thought that, okay, so since our seabed meadows are sequestering this huge amount, then we can offset what our BPL is putting out there. But unfortunately, my dear listener, it doesn't work that way. And during Mr. Hamilton's presentation, during that summit in 2002, the rules of engagements apply to mitigation of carbon being emitted only. So you're not going to be paid for just sequestering carbon out of the environment. What you're going to be paid for is if you mitigate carbon being emitted and cause it to be less carbon emission going into the environment, then you could be paid as an offset. So we don't have the luxury to just sit back and say, let our carbon credits, let our carbon, let our seagrass meadows work for us, let our mangroves work for us, and we just reap the money. It doesn't work that way because the seagrass is not reducing any emission from going into the environment. The mangroves are not reducing any emissions going into the environment. Now, what some entities in the world are doing is they are making machinery. And these machinery are designed to trap carbon as it is being emitted from the funnel of the ship or from the exhaust of BPL. So instead of that full 100% going into the environment when BPL engine is turning, 50% of it or 40% of it or 80% of it is trapped and taken into an area where it could be held and stored. And they got machinery that could convert that into solid or convert that into liquid so that it could be taken and stored under the earth, hundreds of miles under the earth. So that difference in emission that BPL would have done would then be deemed carbon credit that whichever entity was able to trap and store that carbon that did no longer go into the environment will get a credit depending on whatever the dollar value is per ton. And this was all explained by Mr. Hamilton. I didn't talk with him, and I went back and I listened, and I listened to I watched and listened to the presentation that is available on the internet for anybody to pull down and look at. And that is how I concluded that what I was thinking and what many others are thinking, that because we have these seagrass meadows and the mangroves, which are carbon sinks in big high numbers, we should just be paid for it. But boy, unfortunately, it's not as simple as that. It does not work that way. The United Nations have been promised pledges from countries around the world, and they were poised to receive between $1 trillion and $3.7 trillion in order to pay credits for mitigation of carbon during emissions. So my dear friend, let's try and keep this thing in perspective. And it doesn't mean that we as a country should not lobby to receive from the world, by way of the United Nations, some form of credit for us having the ability in our country through seagrass meadows and mangroves to absorb those thousands of pounds of carbon out of the air on a daily basis. So, in my opinion, and I think if you go back to what Prime Minister Mia Mottley, when she did that great speech on 1.5 degrees centigrade, that the bigger countries are putting it out there. And countries like us in the Caribbean and elsewhere in the world are absorbing it. But we need to be compensated for cleaning up the mess that those big countries are making, or those big organizations are making. So yes, while the United Nations are saying, or is saying to countries, we are not prepared to pay countries for simple absorption of carbon out of the environment. What we want to pay for, what we are prepared to pay for, is when you mitigate, when you make a difference from what is being emitted, measures being taken to reduce that. And then we would look at paying you for the balance or the difference between what was being emitted and what is now being emitted from the same source. From the same source. So, it doesn't mean that if you have a Mercedes that runs of gasoline or diesel today, and you change that Mercedes and say, I now have a Mercedes running off battery. I have a battery operated, they call them EVs, electronic vehicles, from Tesla, or even from the bigger organization, BYD, is it? Out of China, that makes most of the world's EVs. So now that I'm not using my Mercedes to put that carbon in the air, I'm putting zero carbon in the air. Can I get some monies or some refunds or some credit for the fact that I made that change? No, it don't work like that. But how it can work is if you say, I have a Mercedes. I am going to put a carbon capture conversion mechanism on my Mercedes engine, and that is going to be captured, so I now only emit 50% of what I used to emit. And that captured carbon is taken into a company that converts that to solid carbon and stores it in the ground. So now I should be compensated for reducing that emission to 50%. Yeah, but now you're in business. Now you're in business. And you know what else? Ships around the world are now fitting carbon capturing devices on the exhaust of those engines and channeling that carbon into void spaces, whereby those void spaces would hold that carbon until that ship reaches into port, and then they would pay a particular company to come and take that stored carbon, take it away, convert it, and now all this stuff got to be verified, of course. You don't just say that's what we do, because you could say that's what you do, and next thing you know, you let it out in the air while the ship's still at sea, and you're looking to get get paid for carbon that was taken out of or trapped and still released into the environment. So it's not as straightforward as many of us may think. The world, by way of the United Nations, is looking at reduction in carbon. So by extension, therefore, we can receive credit or funding for verifying that we reduce the amount of carbon that BPL was emitting into the environment via discontinuing using those engines that utilize fossil fuel and start using engines or start using energy by way of solar, because that is we're no longer emitting all of that carbon anymore because we're solarizing, and that conversion or that change or that mitigation exercise will then put us in a position to receive credits for the reduction of carbon emissions. And it's the same thing with our government changing its fleet of vehicles from combustion engines to EVs. They can say, okay, we used to emit, but again, with vehicles, unless you're going to capture the carbon that was going into there, it doesn't work as simple as just saying, I got to change it. So please bear in mind that the sequestering of carbon out of the atmosphere by our seagrass, meadows, and mangroves cannot realistically bring us monetary returns in any substantial significance unless collectively our country and other countries put forward and get approval for saying that because we are sequestering all this carbon out of the air, we should be compensated somehow, and it have to be accepted by the United Nations, which of course, it has over 200 countries that has 60% of them have to say, yeah, let's pay them. Fat chance of that happening, people, as far as I can see. So as we move further into our discussion on carbon credits, we'll move to our first break. You are listening to Maritime Matters, and on this show, we talk maritime. And of course, we air every Tuesday at 17:05 or 5:05 p.m., right after the short news break on Love 97 FM.
At Bahamas Maritime Connection Limited, we offer first-class maritime security services throughout the Bahamas and the wider Caribbean. As experts in maritime security, we specialize in production of ISPS assessments and plans, verification audits, certified familiarization training, and port security consultancy, just to name a few. Our services also include provision of a security force to maintain all required ISPS facility security compliance. For all your maritime security needs, visit us today in Nassau at our East Street South location or in Freeport in the Kipling Building. Call us at 392-3515 or follow us on all social media platforms. Bahamas Maritime Connection, your leader in maritime security. Let's help you make the connection. At One-on-One Pharmacy, our friendly staff is ready to serve you. Visit us today for all your prescription and over-the-counter needs at our East Street South or Charles Saunders Highway locations. We're open Monday through Saturday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and from 9 to 4 on Sundays. In a rush? Send your refill scripts online at oneononepharmacy.com or ask about our convenient pickup service. One-on-One Pharmacy, providing personal health care with people at heart.
Sitting in the morning sun, I'll be sitting when the evening comes. watching the ships roll in, then I watch them roll away again. Yeah. I'm sitting on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. Just sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. I left my home in Georgia.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Maritime Matters. I am your host, Captain Glenn Bain, and tonight we are discussing carbon credits. Where does the Bahamas stand pertaining to receiving some credit from the carbon that we actually absorb out of the environment on an ongoing basis in big droves. So I want to say good night to my good old anime, my number one fan, our number one fan, the number one fan of Maritime Matters up there in Freeport. And Anime tell me she coming this weekend in Nassau. One of her grandchildren getting married. Anime, you know we gotta link up and do our thing. So I say good night to my good old Anime. She's 91 and going strong, people. And I can tell you, she can hold her own. Good old Andres, South Andres woman. To our listening audience out there, it is my pleasure to introduce to you the man behind the controls, our wonderful producer. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you tonight the insatiable, the man of the hour, the man with all the power. He is fully able, quite capable, the one and only Mr. Craig Gibson. Yes! That, boy, I tell you, that man can give up a salute, eh? That is the salute from my producer, Mr. Craig Gibson. You're listening to Maritime Matters. On this show, we talk maritime. Maritime Matters airs weekly at 1930. Well, it used to be 1930. We changed that to 1705. At 1705, that's 5:05 p.m. every Tuesday on Love 97 FM. The purpose of our show, of course, is to sensitize Bahamians of opportunities in the maritime sectors. We also cover current maritime issues from domestic and international maritime fields. And of course, tonight we are covering carbon credits to the Bahamas. Can we get carbon credits? How can we get carbon credits? Are we supposed to be refunded for the carbon that we are sequestering out of the environment on an ongoing basis, etc., etc., etc.? Our phone number to call if you want in on the show is 326-8255. Again, the lines are open. You can get us, you can reach us tonight, the 11th of June 2024 at 326-8255. And we do have a lot of people that have been watching and following this carbon credit issue. So please, we want you to call in and let us know your views. Let us know your contribution toward what's going on with carbon credits in the Bahamas. The question that comes to mind is, how far away is the Bahamas from receiving the first dollar? And I said to you during the opening that we are blessed with having large banks, large carbon mangrove all over the coast, especially the western side of Andros and Crooked Island and many other islands where we have a lot of mangrove bushes that are sequestering at a very high rate carbon out of the environment. We also have, ladies and gentlemen, what you call seagrass meadows, and we have the largest seagrass meadows in the world. What are seagrass meadows? You know, you go on the beach. Sometimes we go on Goodman's Bay or whatever beach, and you get that nice clear water on the good sand, and then every here and there you have a patch of grass. Well, that patch of grass that when we walk on it is slimy and we don't feel comfortable. That patch of grass is seagrass meadows. Those patches of grass are responsible for sequestering out of the environment at very high rates. Very high rates meaning 35 times faster than the big trees in the forest can sequester carbon out of the environment. So those are very precious grasses. I'll say the most precious grasses in the world, eh? Because what happened is, over a period of centuries, man got smart, eh? You know, man, they say man getting smarter all the time. Now the machine age is look like that want to get into, to take over how smart men are, eh? And we got to watch that very closely. But men got gradually more and more intelligent with the machine age. Now you see, prior to the machine age, the earth had this balance of seagrass meadows, mangroves, and salt marshes, and all the big trees in the Amazon. Before they start to cut all them down, well, I mean, they still have quite a lot, and they are now, I think, being protected. All of them were sequestering carbon out of the environment. So as the sun rises and the earth heats up, and the earth start to, when the sun sets again, the earth start to release all that heat, and it comes up. And then, of course, later on, it starts to get cool because the sun is no longer pounding heat in, and the darkness comes. And after that heat has gone up and released from the earth, everything starts to cool off. And that's why at night it's cooler than, of course, when the sun is out in the day. But that heat that rises out of the earth and goes into space is now being trapped. And it stays between the carbon that surrounds the earth and the earth itself. And then the next day when the sun starts to bake the earth again, more heat comes up. And more heat is being trapped. And so that's why these days we are feeling the heat as though it's far more hotter than days gone by, like 30, 40 years ago when we were younger. The heat never used to be this intense. And this is not only in the Bahamas, people. This is all around the world. It's gotten to the extent where the ice around the North Pole and the South Pole are starting to give. They're starting to melt. And what happens if we have a lot of that melting? As those mountains of ice melt, the water goes into the ocean. And the level of the ocean rises. And what you have today, when tide is high, will start to come onto land. And then we will start losing land. Land will start becoming eroded and we start having more sea because all that ice is melting into the ocean. And eventually, countries like the Bahamas will start losing plenty of its coastline. And if it continues and continues, and we know that we can't allow it to, you start losing land. And then your house start to get flooded. And we've seen it happening now. I mean, we had some rain last week. Just last week. And the line of the flood water on my house is almost to the front door. That never used to happen before. And I was in my house well over 30 years. Never used to happen before. So we see a shift in how, I want a good word to use here, how impacting these floodwaters are becoming, and not only in the Bahamas, worldwide. Worldwide. We've had places in England, central England. Recently we had Dubai, where houses, water was up to the house roof and areas were flooded out. Unprecedented. And then we saw what our big hurricane did in Abaco and Grand Bahama, that was the strongest hurricane that I think we have in the history of recording hurricanes in the Bahamas, eh? And not only the Bahamas, but perhaps in this entire, that was must be up to what? They say hurricane go up to strength 5 or category 5. It must be category 7 or category 8. That's Dorian. One of the worst hurricanes ever. And what hurricanes do? They actually come to take the heat out of the earth. And so we get a call on the line. Caller, you on Maritime Matters. Hello.
Good afternoon, Mr. Captain Bain.
Good afternoon to you, my good brother from Eleuthera and up in the rocks.
Listen, man, I heard about this thing, this carbon credit thing.
Yes, sir.
And I understand that they're working on it, and they have built a company to take care of the carbon credits. And from this one company, they have turned a few other companies onto this company and given them the rights right now to our carbon credits. What's going on? What did you hear?
Well, they have, my friend, and in my research, I realized that they have a company. The Carbon Management Limited, and that company was designated by our government to take care. Oh yeah, they have to be designated by the government. Government own the carbon credits, the carbon. All the seabed meadows are owned by the government. No private entity can own that. But the government identified that company to do our carbon credit trading on the market. So the first thing is, first of all, our carbon credits gotta have a value. And as I indicated earlier, we really don't have no value because we're not mitigating any carbon. All we're doing is sequestering carbon, and nobody's going to pay us for it. Now, in my opinion, we need to lobby, and I'm sure there were lobbying going on all the time, to try and get the rest of the world to pay us for all of this hundreds and thousands of tons of carbon being sequestered out of the environment that can save the earth. But we can't. We have to get that before they can even trade credits, because they ain't get no credits to get.
Okay, so listen, what is this company that is being run by a Mr. Anthony Ferguson doing mixed up in this carbon credit saga? Because it says that him and a few other shell companies are part of this exercise.
Yeah, we got.
I would like to really know what does it mean and how does it affect the Bahamian people. I would like Captain Brain to get a piece of this and say something about this too.
Well, I'm not sure how much research Captain Brain did on this, right? But I can tell you based on research that I've done, which is vast. This carbon credit that we thought, me and many others, and including a lot of government members, right? The authorities, we thought that, okay, because we're sequestering this carbon, which can value, according to the study by the University of Michigan, $156 billion every year, if we are to be paid for it. But if anybody wants, you can't get a dime. That if we can get it sold, but see, the thing is, you can't sell it because it's not reducing the emitting of carbon to anybody else. All you're doing is you sequestering out of the environment, but you're not reducing carbon being put in the air by the entities that created this to begin with. All those big companies that send tons of carbon into the air every day. They're not, if you can get them to pay you, but they can't pay you unless you're mitigating what they're putting out.
Okay, Ben, listen.
I'm listening.
We as Bahamian people have been given a 6 and telling us it's a 9 over and over again. Okay, a 6 is a 6, but a 9 is a 9, and we've been given this. Okay, there were reasons in situations where we were being shafted. Oban, That one didn't turn out. We had the oil spill up in East End. That one didn't turn out. We also had BTC. You know what I mean? Being destroyed. And these people who are our servants supposed to be due diligence with our assets.
Well,
The other day, right, 2 days ago, I spoke to the police, and I said to him, "Hey, brother, you're my servant." You know what I mean? You know that, right? "Oh no, we not no servants." I said, "Listen at me. Who you work for?" "I work for the government." I said, "Who is the government?" He condemned me. I said, "You work for me. You are my servant. You have to protect me. I am paying you to protect me." Do you understand that?
of course, that is the way it should be, my friend. But although you paying me to protect you as a police officer, the police officers still have certain rights by law, where whether you paying them to protect you or not, they can still abduct you and take you in for questioning and suspect you of certain things, and you paying them, but you still on the tail end where they taking charge of you, eh?
Well, I see a woman feeding an alligator the other day, right? She's an alligator. She always feeding this alligator. And guess what happened? Alligator snapper. And the alligator started to roll with her.
Well,
so you know off the top.
Yeah, you also have a lady that had a pet snake in her house, and she keep feeding him, and until the snake got to the size where he figured he could eat the woman, she didn't realize that the snake was just playing with her until he could actually eat her. So you got to be careful on one hand how you feed things that could come back to haunt you, eh?
Well, I tell you one thing, a pig always turns into a hog.
Thank you very much. Yeah, but as far as this carbon sinks that we have, yes, if we were to get paid for it, we would all be multi-millionaire. You'd be getting money for nothing, because the amount of people we have in our country compared to $156 billion a year, we should all be able to get a big fat check at the end of the day. But unfortunately, unlike the countries like Qatar and Kuwait, and they're actually selling oil.
Yes.
But we're not selling carbon that we capture. We can't sell carbon that we sequester. If that was something that we could pick up and sell, my brother, you and I wouldn't have nothing to worry about for a long time.
Okay, stick a pin right there.
Yes, sir.
Even though we may not be able to sell the carbon credits to a point like that, we have billions and trillions of dollars worth of other natural resources that could be sold and marketed.
So,
why haven't we come to the point where each Bahamian can sit down? We're not looking for work.
Yeah, but why don't me and you go ahead and sell those things and make this big money you're talking about?
Listen, we want to become entrepreneurs.
No, but why don't, if we have what you say,
we got enough natural resources, but we don't only have that.
Yeah, but name me which one me and you could go in business with and sell. Name one.
Name one. Okay, we're selling our sunshine and sea.
No. Name which one you and I can go in business with and sell to the rest of the world. Just name one.
Okay, I said we're selling our environment, our sunshine and sea. That's one.
No, but who are we selling that to?
We're selling the tourism.
Me and you selling that to the tourists?
Yes, that's what they come here for.
So, no, but if me and you selling that to tourists, how come we... Now, you got to remember that we're the only country in the world. Every country near the equator have sunshine and sea.
Okay, good, but we're selling our own. Okay, just like natural resources and other things. Plenty places got gold, plenty places got oil, plenty places got hospitality.
Well, like I was in Texas last week, right? I was in Texas last week.
Listen,
No, I want you to hear me 1 second. I was in Texas last week, right? Go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay, we got our airspace, Ben. You know what I mean? We need to capture that. We need to harness that to a point where, you know what I mean, it could be profitable to Bahamian people.
Yeah, but you need to have the right equipment to monitor it first.
We got our sea lanes better.
What sea lanes we have?
Yes.
What sea lanes we have in the Bahamas? We have no sea lanes. Where you get that from?
In the boat pass here.
Boats pass through every country in the world, but we don't have no sea lanes. You have sea lanes in the English Channel. You have sea lanes in very congested areas where huge. Do you know how many ships pass through the Bahamas on a daily basis? Come on, man, we ain't got no sea lanes.
Okay, then that's one that we don't have. Okay, good. But we got other natural resources in the earth, in the sea, in our land.
Yeah, but which one you want me and you go in business with? Let me and you go in business and start selling one of them so we can make some money. And we ain't got to worry about what the government do. Or what this one do, or what that one do. Why don't me and you go in business of selling those things? See, we say these things, right? But if it is like how we say it, then that means we should be able to go there and make some money off it.
I did. I seen a white man the other day. I was in a little and taking pictures of shepherd needles.
Yeah.
Taking pictures of other stuff that we have in the earth.
Yeah.
I know we can sell the shepherd needles.
So why don't you let's go in the business of getting some shepherd needles for sale? Why we gotta let the white man come make the money? Why don't me and you do it?
Ben, listen to me carefully. We need to stop putting all this trust in our servants.
No, what we need to do is we need to stop thinking that money is being made out there and we getting left behind and we can't pinpoint what we're talking about.
Well, you see what they doing, you know what I mean?
What who doing?
Hey, listen, Ben. I am right now, you know what I mean? I am so paid off because guess what? The people who supposed to be there providing and protecting us, you know what I mean? Looking out for themselves.
Well, I mean,
for their families.
that's
They're good buddies, you know what I mean? Because hey, it's situations where oh boy, ain't what you know, so you know.
Well, we know that our country and most countries in the world run that way, eh? But that ain't have nothing to do with that ain't have much to do with the natural resources in our country being available to me or you to make money from. The natural resources in our country, we got people who get permit to abstract sand, aragonite. Do you know that Ocean Key abstracted aragonite for decades? And they were not really making, and at the end of the day, they sold that key because they were not making sufficient profit.
Okay, cool. But guess what, Ben? Let me give you another one. Conch shells. Conch shells, you can get like $30,000 to $40,000 a trailer conch shells.
So why aren't we and you forming a business to go make that money?
Well, they almost retired, man. You know what I mean?
No, but see, when we start looking at the details of these things, we realize that what it cost to buy the equipment and pay the staff and do all of that and pay for the shipping of these things, it may not be as lucrative as we think it is just because we have these things.
Okay, Ben.
You know, so we got to be very careful when we ain't going to be careful. We could just think we could make, but if that's the case, a lot of Bahamians got a lot of money, and if money is so readily able to be made out there from our natural resources, what is stopping from our Bahamians from making that money and stop just crying and hollering and making it look like what it ain't?
Well, business heads will prevail. Okay, we need to start teaching. We need to start from children, start teaching the right thing. You know what I mean? Teaching that God gave us this whole earth, and this whole earth is full of natural resources. You know what I mean? And we could use these natural resources to create and put ourselves on the top. Okay?
I with you on that 1,000 times, my brother, but make it we can do it. So when are we, the Bahamians, going to use our natural resources for export to make money?
Soon.
All right. Now we talking. Me and you on the same page with that, and I thank you so much for your call, as always, for keeping the show alive, my brother. And you continue to take good care of yourself and continue to be a big part of Maritime Matters.
Okay, man.
Thank you, my brother. Oh, my good friend. You know, me and him always getting at it, but guess what? That's what it's all about. It's all about trying to clarify some of the myth out there. And I ain't represent no government because I ain't belong to none. And I ain't never belong to none because I ain't trying to get into politics. And I don't care about who in power. My thing is, all I want is the government of our country, whichever administration is in at the time, to create and expand opportunities for Bahamians. And my area is maritime. And they have an organization responsible for maritime and also responsible for creating and expanding opportunities for Bahamian in the maritime sector. And I know that, they're not really focusing on doing that. They're not doing a good job. They're doing little things, right? But they're not doing what I know could be achieved if they really focus on their responsibility in that area. And that is not the only entity in this country that has obligations to create and expand for opportunities for Bahamians. But just as the caller said just now, we have natural resources, but somehow we're not making money from it. And he mentioned carbon credit management, or I mentioned carbon credit management, because that is an entity that the government had granted the responsibility to sell our carbon credits on the open market, sort of thing, right? And I don't know all the details. But my thing is, what carbon credits are you going to sell on the open market? Yes, we are sequestering billions of dollars worth of carbon if we were to be paid for 1 pound or 1,000 tons. How much are we going to be paid for that? Who is going to pay us for that? And these are the questions that we need to ask before we conclude that we should be making money off these things. Because my view was, because we're sequestering $156 billion worth of carbon out of the air, if we were to be paid for that carbon, then we should be getting that money. And I still say our government needs to engage that avenue, or continue to engage that avenue, where because we are sequestering all this carbon out of the environment, we should be compensated for it. But the position of the United Nations as we speak, according to our government representative, Mr. Hamilton, is that the United Nations is not going to compensate for the sequestering of carbon out of the environment. What they're going to compensate for is the mitigation of carbon being emitted, being reduced. And that's where we need to go. And that's what ships are doing. Many, many ships. And ships have this transition where, because the ship already have engines that are designed to utilize fossil fuel, eh? And that's because that's the way it's been done all along. Before, we had this problem with too much carbon in the environment that are trapping the heat and causing things to go awry. Ships were doing that. But ships realize now that there's a timeline by 2040, 15 years, okay, 16. But 16 years from now, they will not be allowed to even emit no carbon. So they can't use fossil fuels after 2040. Not only ships, BPL wouldn't even be able to utilize fossil fuel after 2040, because 2040 has been agreed by the world by way of the United Nations, and they say everybody got to do what they say, But if you could be the odd one out, you could look so stupid, you might as well just go along with the rest of the world, eh? So the world is going to move to zero fossil fuel emission once we reach 2040. And so you got 16 years to make that transition. And because ships have these engines that are all designed to go with fossil fuel, they are now converting those engines to utilize natural gas, which emits like 50% less fuel than those big, those fossil fuel when that is burned. So they are converting their engines to use natural gas, and after that, between the rest of the 2020s, let's say by 2030 and 2040, 10 years, they realized that even the natural gas wouldn't be able to be used no more. So they are all now looking to say we'll do natural gas first and then we'll move to just batteries. Because they're making smaller vessels now that don't emit any carbon. They have no exhaust. You don't even hear them when they operate. You see all the cars, the Teslas and the BYDs called Build Your Dream car out of China that are taking over the European market, and they're becoming very much cheaper now. And they're not doing this because they feel like this is how we want to go. They're doing that because they know that by 2030, they're supposed to make that effort to cut down 30% of what is being emitted. And if you go from vehicles with combustion engines to vehicles with just batteries, you have done the 100% shift. But a lot of people are going to hybrids as well. Now hybrids, as you know, have a small combustion engine along with a big battery. And what it does is that combustion engine will take you from the battery will take you from 0 to about 30 miles per hour. And once you get over 30 miles per hour, the combustion engine kicks in and takes it, because the combustion engine uses far more energy getting you up to 30 than the batteries would use. And so that combination of anytime you go over 30, you're using that combustion engine, and anytime you go under 30, you're back on battery. And the combustion engine is also designed to charge that battery. So that is a combination, but even that, those hybrids, when 2040 reaches, would have to become extinct because they can no longer use fossil fuel. All of our gas stations in 2040 will no longer be providing fuel. All those big oil tankers on the sea in 2040, you may see 10% of them. So 90% of them would have to convert to either carrying containers or whatever they want to do, but bulk carriers, whatever, but they certainly wouldn't be able to be, as we know it, tankers, fuel tankers. Because what's going to happen, if you look that far ahead, you'll be able to see, right, that countries are now moving to windmills, wind-generated power. They have wind farms in the northern areas. That's up in the Baltics, that's up in the northern states, that's deep south. And why are they having these wind farms? Because they don't get sunlight like we do around the equator to depend totally on solar. But like I was about to tell my good friend King Arthur, my good friend from Savannah Sound and 8 Mile Rock, I was in Texas over the past couple of days. Just came back in yesterday. And the heat in Texas is far hotter than it is, well, I can't say it's hotter, but the temperature is hotter, it's higher. And we know that Texas sometimes goes up to 120 degrees. Texas is known to be hot, very hot in the summer. Even New York, when this heat comes, it comes in big droves because they got a big land mass that the sun could light up or heat up during sunlight. And once the earth gets heated up by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, that heat starts to rise, and then you have the sun coming from above and the heat from the earth coming from below, and you sandwich with all that heat. And then when that heat can't escape, because you have a ring of carbon around the earth that is trapping it and causing it can't get out into space, that intensifies. And every day it's added. So it gets hotter and hotter. And as the years roll around, if we don't do something about it, And that's why the world has moved. The United Nations, that represents most countries in the world, over 200 countries, had moved to the discontinuation of fossil fuel by 2040. It took a while to do that. It wasn't easy to do, you know. And they had to get that. You can imagine a country like Kuwait and Qatar and UAE, countries that have all this oil that they're selling to the world, will no longer be making a dime from selling that oil. They're no longer going to be getting those billions of dollars every year in their revenue. Because who are you going to sell it to if everybody is operating off solar and wind farms? Nobody need no fuel no more. They're using the natural elements of the earth, or of the world, natural elements like the sun and the wind, to create the same amount or even more energy that they're getting from using your fuel. Why would they don't need no more fuel from you? And the price of electricity will no longer be going up and down depending on the cost of the fuel. Because you will store from the sun, especially in countries like the Bahamas where we have a full year of sunshine. We got heat energy from the sun 365 days every year. Well, 364 and 5 on a leap year, every year. So we will have no more need to depend on fossil fuel. Once we can get enough energy, we can put enough solar farms in place that will convert and feed the energy into the existing energy bank we have. So the only difference will be, instead of we getting all these tankers come to Clifton Pier and places like that and drop off oil that we have to pay for, we will have to replace that. Solar farms don't have to be in the sea, but we got plenty of banks. We could do it on the sea. And we could do it on land. But we'll have enough solar panels to provide that same amount of energy. And we already have the infrastructure with all the lines and everything that goes to people's houses and whatnot. So you will have solar providing the 4 megawatts, 400 megawatts. Because we have like 370 megawatts of power that we supply to New Providence right now. So we will get 400 megawatts now. Just recently, we've heard in the news where there's a move to bring in some around 90 megawatts of solar power to Nassau, or to New Providence, and another so much megawatts to the Family Islands. And there's no reason why, once we get into solarizing our power, we shouldn't continue until we can get 400 megawatts or 500 megawatts. We could even get too much, Because all you're doing is trapping the heat energy and storing it for when you're ready to send it, propagate through the system that's already in place. So we are only making the shift from receiving tankers in the fuel and all those fuel tanks we got at Clifton Pier, the sun oil and what we call ESSO and what we call Texaco, which is now Sol Petroleum and you all know the deal, right? They will no longer need to have all those storage tanks, because we will no longer need to have all that fuel or any fuel coming into the country after 2040. So perhaps the space where those storage tanks are will become solar panels, banks and banks of solar panels. And of course, you can need more space because you obviously need more solar panels than you will need fuel tanks. But you can achieve the same amount of energy with solar panels if you put enough in place. And you're no longer depending on another country to provide you with a source to receive electrical power. And if all the vehicles, and the government will mandate that by 2040, there'll be no more combustion engine vehicles being imported into the country or even being utilized. They probably stopped it from being imported from about 2030, 2035, eh? Because you will no longer be able to utilize, the government will have to pay if we are having vehicles that are emitting carbon into the environment. So the government will have to mandate at some point that you no longer have these vehicles that have combustion engines. And all the vehicles will become EVs or electric vehicles with a big battery. No more engine. No more gearbox. They will be run by this big battery, and they have many of them out already. And in the growing phase, of course, they're going to have challenges, issues. But when they get this up and going the way it should or the way it's anticipated, those things will be few and far between. And you and me will try to figure out why we wasn't doing this from 100 years ago. Just like when the video first came in, it was very costly. And eventually, you started to pay a little, you started paying less and less until everybody could have had a video. TV, even flat screen, when flat screen first came out, what we had? You pay $4,000 or $5,000 for one big flat screen. It wasn't even big as the ones we now getting for like $700-800. And you could get a flat screen now for $100 and something if you want a small one. So as technology develops, these things become cheaper and far more efficient. So we can anticipate that by 2040, there will only be EVs on the road. And the question kicks in. Okay, so we're going to have all electrical vehicles, but we got to charge them at night, eh? Where are we going to charge them? Well, we got to charge them like we normally charge anything else, by way of BPL pushing in a plug. And when you push in that plug, today, you're saying that, well, BPL got to burn the fossil fuel for me to push in that plug and get energy for my car. But that's not going to be the case for BPL in 2048 because BPL will be fully solarized. And I'm not even going to wind farms because in a country like this, we're wasting time fooling with, mind you, we got plenty of banks where we could put windmills and wind farms on that a lot of countries in the north don't even have. They have to use the floating windmills, which cost a lot more money for stability and all the rest of that. But we are so blessed that we have 24 hours, 364 days sun energy, heat energy from the sun. And even in times when we have an overcast and hurricanes and all the rest of that, because we have stored so much of it, because you guys store it first, then you got to convert it. Yeah, but the converters and the things that you have to put in place with the batteries and all the rest, we got to do all of that. But the sunlight provides enough energy for us to do that and not have to worry about fossil fuel. Not have to worry about fossil fuel. So again, if we project forward and look ahead, we would see that there'll be no more need for gas stations. You'll have charging stations for your EV even when you go to a restaurant, when you go to work, when you're home. You don't need no more gas stations because you ain't gonna need no more gas. You ain't gonna need no more tankers on the water because you ain't gonna need no more transferring from the Middle East, that Persian Gulf, all around the world, that fuel that everybody got to buy. So energy is going to cost us less. So, 15 years down the road, we'll be blinging. We'll be doing a lot better. We could save a lot more money by not having to pay these big light bills. And things are just going to get that much better. So again, ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Maritime Matters because it's Tuesday, and at 17:05 every Tuesday, we have Maritime Matters. I'm your host, Captain Glenn Bain, and we will move to our final break before ending our show in about 10 minutes. So please, stay tuned.
At One-on-One Pharmacy, our friendly staff is ready to serve you. Visit us today for all your prescription and over-the-counter needs at our East Street South or Charles Saunders Highway locations. We're open Monday through Saturday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and from 9 to 4 on Sundays. In a rush? Send your refill scripts online at oneononepharmacy.com or ask about our convenient pickup service. One-on-One Pharmacy, providing personal health care with people at heart. At Bahamas Maritime Connection Limited, we offer first-class maritime security services throughout the Bahamas and the wider Caribbean. As experts in maritime security, we specialize in production of ISPS assessments and plans, verification audits, certified familiarization training, and port security consultancy, just to name a few. Our services also include provision of a security force to maintain all required ISPS facility security compliance. For all your maritime security needs, visit us today in Nassau at our East Street South location or in Freeport in the Kipling Building. Call us at 392-3515 or follow us on all social media platforms. Bahamas Maritime Connection, your leader in maritime security. Let's help you make the connection.
Sitting in the morning sun, I'll be sitting when the evening comes, watching the ships roll in, then I'll watch them roll away again. Yeah. I'm sitting on the dock of the bay.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. You're listening to Maritime Matters. On this show, we talk maritime. We're about to close out. We got 5-6 minutes left. Our topic for the night, and if you want in on this discussion, please feel free to call us. That's 326-8255. You can reach us at 326-8255. We're discussing carbon credits, the effect of carbon as we move toward net zero, no more carbon emissions by 2040, a reduction by 30% of carbon by 2030, and let's have the discussion. Some of the questions that we ask is, for how long might the Bahamas be receiving compensation for sequestering carbon? And as we said earlier, we sequester carbon, and unless we, the Bahamas and countries like us, are able to convince the rest of the world or the United Nations that we should be receiving money for sequestering carbon out of the environment, we have no monies to receive for our carbon sinks, all of that seagrass meadows and all of that mangroves we got around our country, sequestering carbon out of the environment at an ongoing basis. And what happens when the conversion happens? When we no longer have carbon being emitted into the environment in 2040 and beyond, we will have a situation where our seagrass meadows continue to take carbon out of the environment in staggering amounts. or staggering volumes. But the world really not depending on that anymore, because all of that carbon that is blocking the heat from escaping the Earth's environment will start to disintegrate. And it wouldn't be feeding anymore, because the carbon that are being emitted now from all those ships, all those airplanes is another story, eh? And all those power plants around the world, all those vehicles around the world will no longer be putting carbon into there like that. So everything will clear away, come back to normal, and the entire world would have realized what it is to be operating without all that carbon pollution. You see these jitneys stop, and when they go to pull off, you see that big puff of black smoke. That could be a thing of the past. Jitneys wouldn't even have engines. Tractors wouldn't even have engines. Ships wouldn't even have engines. They will all be operating on this big battery. They will all have little solar panels all over the place. And those big cruise ships that come into port, we can now give them. They could plug in to the port electrical grid and feed off our solar power while they're in port, and at a cheap rate, because we don't have to bring fuel all the way from the Middle East to give to them or sell to them. No. We have the sun giving us heat energy on an ongoing basis, particularly during the daytime, and we're storing that. So we always got more than enough to give them some. Well, not give them, to sell them some. All of our electricity bill will be significantly reduced. The cost for tourists to live in a hotel, based on the energy being significantly reduced, will be far cheaper than it is today. So we're going to have all kind of wins out of this conversion. And it's a period that personally I look forward to. While we're not going to be able to get, or we're not at this, how the outlook is at this point, from the United Nations, $100+ billion a year, because we're sequestering so much carbon out of the environment. We will be able to make significant savings on the cost of electrical or electricity for our day-to-day living, eh? So, ladies and gentlemen, that's time for us to roll out. So I say to you, thank you so much for listening to Maritime Matters tonight and always. I thank my good producer, Mr. Craig Gibson, for keeping things ticking along as we go. I thank my good Annie Mae for continuing to be our #1 fan. I thank our sponsors, One-on-One Pharmacy, Island Care Pharmacy, and of course, Bahamas Maritime Connection Limited, for keeping our show live and kicking. And until we meet again on the next Tuesday, which is next week, Tuesday the 18th, I say to you, as always, Maritime Matters out.
I left my home in Georgia, headed for the Frisco Bay. I've had nothing to live for, look like nothing's gonna come my way. So I'm just gonna sit on the dock of the bay, watching the tide